Chapter 12. The Harlot of Bear River. No leniency was certainly the watchword of the Bridgetown Monitor, and the paper's editor did not stop with Peter Wheeler. Within hours of the tragedy, the editor passed unflinching judgment on two women who, through no fault of their own, found themselves in the eye of the storm. The Monitor first set its intransigent sights on Tilly Comeau, the accused man's landlady, although the paper was keen to imply she was so much more. More than 10 years Wheeler's senior, Tilly seemed hopelessly miscast as the object of Peter's affections. She was generously called handsome by some acquaintances, although more thought her plain. Wheeler was a lad of 14 when he first approached her to rent a room. She was 25 and already a mother twice over. The St. John Daily Sun noted that Tilly still spoke of Wheeler as if he were a boy, even as he sat in chains, accused of murder at the age of 26. Despite their feint to Tilly's maternal leanings, the Sun added the caustic codicil that if Dame Rumor is correct, Mrs. Comeau was more of a wife than a mother to the prisoner. Their unconventional living arrangement had lasted, off and on, for 12 years. Whenever the need arose, Wheeler took work aboard one of the merchant vessels steaming out of Bear River. Months later, with his pockets replenished and his wanderlust sated, Wheeler would once again wash up on Tilly's doorstep. Money was tight all around. In addition to taking in boarders to make ends meet, Tilly worked a number of menial jobs about town, including that of chambermaid at the Bear River Hotel. One out-of-province news agency found sources who described Tilly as a hard-working, industrious woman that you can trust without limit. No Nova Scotia paper searched that hard. Yet, in spite of Comeau's gainful employment and a few kind words from her neighbors, the Bridgetown Monitor took issue with her virtue and integrity. This woman bears an unsavory reputation, and has a number of children, although said to be unmarried. At the time of Annie's death, Tilly still had a small brood at home, her daughter Hattie, aged 19, and two sons, Herbert, 15, and Walter, 11. While their paternity remains an open question, none of the children were fathered by Peter Wheeler. The Monitor was not alone in challenging the bond between Wheeler and his landlady. One New Brunswick tabloid reported, "There are strange stories afloat concerning their relationship." The critical difference, of course, was that all other news agencies also acknowledged the whispers as exactly that, unfounded gossip by a fearful and traumatized populace. For example, the St. John Daily Sun noted that some of the neighbors are uncharitable enough to say that the pair are too intimate from a moral point of view, placing the shame and blame back on the scandal-mongering neighbors where it belonged. Tilly's tenure in the spotlight was not solely on account of her nebulous relationship with the accused. She, along with her children, played a far more substantial role in the proceedings, namely that of Wheeler's alibi. From the moment Peter left Annie, still very much alive, at her house just after 8 p.m. Monday until 8 a.m. the next day, when Comeau sent Peter to the Kemptons to get milk, Tilly and the kids were with Wheeler every second. It was the one question regarding Peter Wheeler that Tilly was eager to answer. She even paused during her inquest testimony and insisted, in no uncertain terms, that her words be recorded verbatim. The irascible landlady, plain-spoken and possessed of a quicksilver temper, was used to being misunderstood and did not want anyone mistaking her meaning. Time and again, Tilly was asked whether it was possible for Wheeler to leave the house without her knowledge. On this point, Tilly was adamant. It was next to impossible for Wheeler to go out without being heard. He had to pass through 3 doors, 2 of which made a desperate creaking noise when opened and would surely have been heard. Despite Tilly's mottled reputation in the village, even the ever-skeptical Detective Power accepted her story. When asked by a reporter from the Morning Chronicle if Tilly Comeau was trying to shield Wheeler, Power replied confidently, "No, not in the least." It is a credit to Power's innate chivalry that, in spite of his own vendetta against Wheeler, he did not feel the need to sully the reputation of Peter's beleaguered landlady. That Power would later argue Tilly's testimony supported his much-maligned timeline of the crime may also have contributed to the detective's magnanimous gallantry. Having waged its unwarranted yet strangely unresented war on Tilly Comeau, the Bridgetown Monitor prepared to do battle on an entirely new front: Mary Kempton, the bereft mother of the innocent victim. It was a risky strategy, one sure to ignite controversy and sales, or so they hoped. In the days following the murder, the circumstances surrounding Mrs. Kempton's absence from the home were the subject of much speculation, as was the duration of her truancy. With little regard for the facts, several news agencies implied that Mary had been gone from the house for months or even years. The truth made for far less scandalous reading. According to her oldest surviving daughter, Mary Kempton had been in Bear River as recently as Christmas. She enjoyed the holiday with her husband, son, and Annie before returning to Boston on December 27, 1895. What compelled Mary's departure was further grist for the mill. According to the Monitor, Annie's absentee mother has not been under medical treatment as was first reported. That the Monitor itself was the source of the erroneous report apparently did not bear mentioning. Rather, the fact-challenged tabloid went on to say that she had spent the previous 4 months in Boston, working to relieve the straitened, sick, circumstances of the family. The editor then proceeded to berate Mrs. Kempton for abandoning her daughter and putting the family finances ahead of the welfare of her child. Conveniently overlooked was the fact that Mary had not abandoned her daughter but had left her in the care of her father and older brother, an entirely safe and reasonable arrangement. In defiance of all conventional wisdom, the Bridgetown Monitor found fault not only with Mary's prolonged absence from the home but also with the Kemptons' choice of chaperone. Killing 2 birds with a single libelous stone, the Monitor hurled the blame for Annie's death at her grieving parents while simultaneously taking potshots at their neighbor Tilly Comeau, whose only crime was agreeing to serve as Annie's tutelary in their absence. In a meandering yet pointed editorial, the Monitor proclaimed, "We must express a feeling of surprise and wonderment that intelligent and well-intentioned people, as Mr. and Mrs. Kempton undoubtedly are, should have taken no further precautions for the safety of a girl of their daughter's tender years and supplied no better protector during their absence than a woman of such a character and reputation as that borne, sick, by Tilly Comeau." Heaping scorn on the guilt-ridden parents of a murdered child was a curious proposition for a local paper, particularly when the only benefit to such censure was the indirect berating of a woman already held in low regard. Neither the Kemptons nor Tilly did anything to warrant the Monitor's sanctimonious tirade, and they had no avenue of recourse or rebuttal. Unlike their tabloid accuser, the slandered objects of the Monitor's ridicule took the high road, electing to remain silent in the face of meritless derision. The Kemptons were occupied by far greater burdens. As for Tilly Comeau, the so-called wanton trollop of the Annapolis Valley, she bore the slings and arrows of the Bridgetown Monitor with a strength of character its editor sorely lacked. A town that had so boldly compared itself to that bastion of neutrality, Switzerland, was now fractured under the weight of an unspeakable crime. In the shards of their once placid village, the denizens took no prisoners, save for Peter Wheeler, and cast out all sinners, starting with Tilly Comeau.